40 years ago, the deep space research vessel Meridian sent one final transmission before it went dark. The message was 11 seconds long. No words. Just breathing. Fast, ragged, human breathing, and underneath it, a second sound. A voice, layered beneath the static, saying the exact same thing the listener was about to say. Command dismissed it as equipment failure. Filed it. Forgot it. 40 years later, that transmission is the only reason anyone is still listening when the Meridian's beacon flickers back on. This is the story of the 4 people who answered it, and why, by the end, only one of them believed they had a choice. The salvage ship Vestige 7 was never built for glory. It was built for scraps, hauling dead satellites, gutting abandoned mining rigs, selling whatever still had resale value in a galaxy that had stopped caring about the past. Captain Alia Farrow liked it that way. Dead things didn't argue. Dead things didn't need saving. So when the Meridian's beacon pulsed back to life on her console, a ship that had been declared lost for 4 decades, drifting in a dead zone near the edge of charted space, her first instinct was to log it as a glitch and move on. Her second instinct, the one that paid the bills, was to check the salvage value of a 40-year-old research vessel still fully intact. That instinct is the reason 4 people are about to die. Or maybe already have. By the end of this, the difference stops mattering. The crew was small. Farrow, hard-eyed and practical, 20 years in salvage and allergic to sentiment. Devin Okafor, her engineer, the kind of man who talked to machines like they could hear him, because out here, sometimes he needed to believe something could. Priya Anand, contracted xenobiologist, along for reasons she kept vague and a paycheck she needed badly. And Tomas Reyes, the youngest, barely 2 years out of flight school, still naive enough to think a derelict ship was an adventure and not a warning. They found the Meridian exactly where the old logs said it should be, tumbling slow and silent at the edge of a gravitational anomaly the original expedition had been sent to study. A collapsed stellar remnant. Not quite a black hole. Not quite anything with a name. The kind of thing the universe usually keeps hidden for a reason. Life support still running, Okafor said, reading the derelict's diagnostics from the Vestige's bridge. 40 years, no resupply, and it's still running. That's not possible. Maybe it's not 40 years for them, Priya said quietly. Nobody laughed. Nobody agreed either. They just got their suits on. The Meridian was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Farrow led the boarding party through a hull breach near the cargo bay, weapons light, salvage standard, cutters, scanners, a single sidearm each because regulations demanded it, not because anyone expected to use one. The corridors were pristine. That was the first wrong thing. No dust, no decay, no 40 years of entropy, just clean matte walls and humming lights, like the crew had stepped out for a lunch break and never come back. The second wrong thing was the calendar on the mess hall wall. Someone had been marking off days with a stylus. The mark stopped 3 weeks in. Not 40 years. 3 weeks. Somebody was counting, Tomas said, running his glove along the marks. Somebody was here after the crew supposedly died. Or somebody's still here, Priya said. They found the Meridian's black box in the command deck, still intact, still logging. Okafor jacked into it and pulled the final entries onto his tablet while the others swept the room. The last logged entry wasn't a distress call. It was a countdown. A researcher named Dar. Elena Voss, chief scientist of the original expedition, had recorded it 12 hours before the ship went dark. The anomaly isn't a black hole. It's a fold. Space folding back on itself, and time folding with it. We've been running the same 6 hours over and over for, I don't know how long anymore. Every time we get close to answers, it resets us. Not our memories. Just, everything else. If you're hearing this, you're not the first crew to hear it. You won't be the last. Get away from this thing while your names still belong to you. The recording ended. The room stayed very quiet. She sounds crazy, Tomas said, too quickly, the way people say things when they need them to be true. She sounds specific, Pharaoh said. Crazy people ramble. She gave us a warning with a shape to it. Okafor was still staring at his tablet, scrolling. Pharaoh. There are more logs. Hundreds more. Same 6-hour window, over and over, different voices. Different crews. Different crews, Priya repeated. How many ships have come looking for the Meridian in 40 years? Okafor checked the registry. Officially? Just us. They should have left then. Every instinct in the room said so. But salvage crews don't get paid for instincts, and Pharaoh had never in her life walked away from a payday without at least trying to understand what she was walking away from. So they split up. Standard protocol. Okafor stayed with the black box, pulling everything he could before the Meridian's dying batteries gave out. Priya went to the science bay to check the anomaly readings against the ship's original mission logs. Tomas and Pharaoh pushed toward engineering, looking for whatever had kept life support running for 40 years on paper and 3 weeks in practice. That was when the ship's clocks reset. It happened without warning, no tremor, no alarm, just a subtle wrongness, like a word repeated so many times it stopped sounding like a word. Pharaoh's suit chronometer, which had read 14:22, blinked and settled back to 8 o'clock. Beside her, Tomas made a small confused sound and looked at his own display. Pharaoh. My clock just. I saw it. Over the comm, Okafor's voice came through tight. Guys, I need you to hear this calmly. I just watched myself walk past the science bay door. I was standing right here. And I watched myself, same suit, same gait, walk past like nothing was wrong. Silence on the channel. Devon, Pharaoh said carefully, we're in engineering. Nobody from our team is near the science bay. I know, Okafor said. That's what I'm telling you. Priya's voice cut in next, quieter, more controlled, the voice of someone deliberately not panicking. I found something. The original crew's science logs, Voss wasn't just recording the anomaly. She was recording repeats. There's a term in her notes. She calls it the fold event. Every 6 hours, roughly, the ship, and everyone on it, gets pulled backward along a loop. Not far. Just far enough to relive the same stretch of time. And each time, something carries over that shouldn't. What carries over? Pharaoh asked, though some part of her already didn't want the answer. Awareness, Priya said. Not everyone's. But some. Voss thinks that's why the original crew's final log sounds so calm and so certain. By the time she recorded that message, she'd lived through this loop enough times to know exactly how it ends. How does it end? Tomas asked. Nobody answered right away. She didn't say, Priya finally admitted. The log cuts off. But there's a partial line right before it does. She wrote, the version of you that gets out is not the version of you that goes in. They regrouped in the mess hall against every protocol Pharaoh had ever followed, because right now the only thing that felt worse than breaking procedure was being alone in a ship that apparently contained more than 4 people. Okafor was pale under the fluorescence. I'm telling you what I saw. It wasn't a hallucination. It had weight. It had a shadow. Could be residual holographic data, Pharaoh offered, grasping for the mundane. Old research ships ran predictive AI simulations. Maybe there's a system still active, playing back recorded movement. Except it looked at me, Okafor said. Pharaoh. It turned its head and looked directly at me before it kept walking. Tomas had gone very quiet, staring at the mess hall's wall calendar, the one marked with 3 weeks of hash marks before the counting stopped. He reached out and touched the wall beside it, where the paint was slightly different, like something had once been written there and scrubbed away. There's more marks under this, he said. Someone painted over something. Pharaoh pulled a UV scanner from her kit, standard salvage gear, used for finding hidden serial numbers on gutted ships, and ran it over the wall. Beneath the fresh paint, faint undermarks glowed into view. Not hash marks. Words. Dozens of layers of the same handwriting, overlapping, each pass slightly different, like someone had written and rewritten the same message across who knew how many loops. Don't trust the one who speaks first. Underneath, fainter, older, you already know who it is. And underneath that, barely legible, the earliest layer of all, it's me. It was always going to be me. I'm sorry. Priya's hand had gone still on her tablet. Guys, she said slowly. I need everyone to check their suit logs. Right now. Timestamp everything you've done since we boarded. They did. And that was when they found the gap. Tomasa's suit log showed 22 minutes he couldn't account for, a stretch of time between the first clock reset and their regroup in the mess hall, where his own suit recorded him standing motionless in the science bay corridor, alone, for reasons his own memory did not contain. That's not possible, Tomas said, and his voice cracked on the second word. I was with Pharaoh. I was in engineering the whole time. Pharaoh looked at him for a long moment. Then at the wall. Then back at him. Don't trust the one who speaks first. Tomas had spoken first, back in the science bay, when he read Vasa's log and said, too quickly, she sounds crazy. Nobody said anything. But nobody looked away from him either, and Tomas felt the shift in the room like a drop in air pressure. You think it's me, he said. You actually think. The lights flickered. Every clock on every suit reset again, all at once, back to 8 o'clock. And when they came back up, there were 5 people standing in the mess hall instead of 4. The fifth figure wore a vestige, 7 suit, badge and all, helmet fogged just enough to obscure the face beneath it. It stood at the edge of the room, not moving, not speaking, just present in a way that made the air feel thinner. Pharaoh's hand went to her sidearm. Identify yourself. The figure lifted a gloved hand and, slowly, unlatched its own helmet. Underneath was Tomas. Older, a decade older, at least, gray threading through hair that on the Tomas beside them was still dark, a scar along his jaw that the younger Tomas didn't have. His eyes were the eyes of someone who had run out of ways to be afraid a long time ago. Don't shoot, older Tomas said, voice hoarse. I know exactly what you're thinking, and I know exactly how it feels, because I've stood where you're standing. All of you. More times than I can count anymore. Young Tomas had backed against the wall, breathing hard. What is this? It's you, older Tomas said, gently, terribly gently. In a few more loops. Give or take. Time doesn't fold clean here. It stretches some of us further than others. I've been on this ship, I don't know. Long enough. Priya found her voice first, clinical, holding on to facts like a lifeline. The fold event. It doesn't just repeat time. It's been pulling forward versions of us and dropping them back into earlier iterations of the loop. That's Vasa's theory too, older Tomas said. She called it bleed through. The loop isn't a circle. It's a spiral. Every pass, it collects people. Some from before. Some from after. Eventually the ship isn't just running the same 6 hours anymore, it's running every version of those 6 hours, all layered on top of each other, and the walls get thin enough that we start seeing through them. Where's Vas now? Pharaoh asked. Older Tomasa's face did something complicated. She figured out how to leave a message that would survive the resets, the wall, the black box logs. She used the last stable version of herself she had to do it. Then she used what was left to try something else. Something that might actually break the loop instead of just documenting it. What happened to her? I don't know, he admitted. That's the part that should scare you most. Even after everything, I don't know if it worked. I don't know if she got out. I don't know if out is even a place that still exists for her. All I know is she was trying, and trying costs something on this ship. It costs a version of you. They worked fast, because older Tomas insisted the reset window was closing and because young Tomas kept looking at his older self like a man watching his own eulogy get read aloud. Voss's remaining research pointed to the anomaly's control node, not a machine, exactly, more a convergence point in the ship's original science bay, where the meridian had first made contact with the fold. The theory, as older Tomas explained it, wasn't complicated in principle. The loop needed an anchor, someone whose awareness stayed continuous enough across resets to serve as a kind of key. Voss had been that anchor for decades, exhausting herself into fragments to keep mapping the fold from the inside. If someone else took her place at the convergence point, willingly, consciously, during the exact moment of a reset, they could, in theory, redirect the loop's pull outward instead of inward. Send it looking for a new equilibrium. Let everyone else walk free while the anomaly settled on someone new to orbit. Someone stays, Priya said slowly. That's what you're telling us. Someone has to stay behind, in that room, holding the door open with themselves, so the rest of us can leave. That's what happened last time, older Tomas said. And the time before that. And I suspect times I don't remember. Pharaoh looked at him, really looked, at the decade of exhaustion carved into a face that belonged to a 24-year-old kid standing 3 feet away, and understood before he said the next part. It's not going to be you again, she said. It wasn't a question. It was always going to be me, older Tomas said. Every loop. Every version. I don't think that's fate, or destiny, or any of the words people like to use to make helplessness sound noble. I think it's just math. I'm the one who came back to warn you, which means in every loop where someone survives long enough to leave a warning, it's because a version of me chose to stay. I've watched myself make that choice in the wall writing, over and over, in handwriting I don't remember producing. Layer after layer. It was always going to be me. Young Tomas's voice was very small. So what happens to him? To me? I don't fully know, older Tomas said honestly. Voss thought the anchor doesn't die, exactly. Doesn't disappear. Just, stops moving forward with everyone else. Keeps living the loop, alone, so the loop stops needing new people to feed it. A kind of stillness. A kind of peace, maybe, if you squint at it right. I've had a long time to squint at it. Pharaoh's jaw tightened. There has to be another way. I looked, older Tomas said, and for the first time his composure cracked, just slightly, just enough to show the decade of looking underneath it. I looked for so long, Captain. Every reset, every layer, every version of me that ever stood in that science bay, we all looked. This is the only door out that doesn't close on all of you. They reached the science bay with 11 minutes left before the next fold event, according to older Tomas's count. A count he trusted with the grim precision of a man who had done nothing else for years that no longer had a number attached to them. The convergence point wasn't dramatic. No glowing altar, no obvious machine. Just a chair, bolted to the deck, facing a viewport that looked out on the collapsed stellar remnant twisting slowly against the dark, beautiful, in the specific way that things which want to kill you are sometimes allowed to be beautiful. Young Tomas stared at the chair like it was a verdict. I don't want to do this, he said. I know, older Tomas said. I remember not wanting to. I remember it very clearly, actually, that's the strange thing about the fold, it's generous about letting you keep the memories that hurt the most. Then why are you helping me get here? Older Tomas crouched down to his own younger eye level, and for a moment the resemblance stopped being frightening and started being something closer to tender. Because I already know how the story goes if nobody chooses. The fold doesn't stop asking just because we refuse to answer. It just keeps the ship running on empty until it's not 4 people caught in a loop anymore, it's 40. 100. Every crew that ever answers that beacon, stacked on top of each other, forever. Someone choosing is the only thing that's ever given anyone a way out. I'd rather it be a choice than a harvest. Pharaoh stepped forward. Take me instead. Older Tomas shook his head, almost gentle about the refusal. It doesn't work that way, Captain. I've seen others try. The fold already has a shape carved for this loop, and the shape is him. I don't fully understand why. Maybe it's arbitrary. Maybe Voss picked wrong the first time and the pattern just calcified. I've stopped needing the universe's reasons to make sense, I only need them to be true. Priya's voice, when she finally spoke, was steady in the specific way people get steady right before they stop being able to hold it. There's still time. We could take the black box, everything we've documented, get back to the vestige, and tell the next people not to come. Warn everyone off this coordinate permanently. Voss thought of that too, older Tomas said quietly. It's in the deep logs, further back than the ones you found. Warnings were sent. 19 years ago, official channels flagged this coordinate as forbidden. Command buried it because deep space salvage rights are worth more than a rumor about a haunted research vessel. That's why your beacon still worked. That's why you're standing here at all. The clock in the corner of every suit display ticked down. 6 minutes. Young Tomas looked at Pharaoh, at Priya, at Okafor, and then, longest, at the older version of himself, at the only living proof that some part of this ended in someone still being able to speak, still being able to warn the next crew, still being, in whatever fractured way, himself. If I do this, he said, will I remember being me? Older Tomas's answer took a long time to arrive, and when it did, it wasn't really an answer at all. I remember enough to be standing here talking to you. I think that has to be worth something. Young Tomas sat in the chair. The reset came the way it always came, without ceremony, without mercy, a subtle wrongness spreading through the room like cold water finding the seams in a hull. Every clock reached 0 at once. But this time, someone was holding the door. Pharaoh would remember it, later, as light without a source, not blinding, just total, the way silence is total right before something breaks it. She would remember Priya's hand gripping her arm. She would remember Okafor saying a name, over and over, like a countdown running the wrong direction. And she would remember Tomas's voice, young Tomas, the one in the chair, saying something just before the light took him, something none of them fully heard and none of them ever fully agreed on afterward. Okafor swore it sounded like a question. Priya swore it sounded like relief. Pharaoh never told either of them what she thought she heard, because what she thought she heard was her own name, and she has never been able to explain, even to herself, why a boy about to become a ghost in a folded ship would spend his last ordinary second saying goodbye to a captain he'd known for exactly one very long day. When the light faded, the chair was empty. Not destroyed. Not bloodied. Simply empty, the way a room is empty after someone steps out of it and doesn't come back. The clocks on their suits did not reset again. They left the meridian 9 hours later, black box secured, findings logged, older Tomas's account recorded in exhaustive, aching detail, an account that, notably, stopped the moment the light appeared. He had no memory of what came after, no memory of watching his younger self vanish. He simply found himself standing in the mess hall afterward, alone, feeling, his words, like a sentence someone had finally finished. He didn't come back with them. He said the fold hadn't fully released him, that some part of him was still tangled in whatever the anchor point had become, and that leaving might unravel something none of them wanted unraveled while they were still aboard. Pharaoh argued. Priya argued harder. In the end, he simply wasn't in the airlock when the outer door cycled, and by the time they realized it, the meridian systems had already begun powering down around him, gentle as a held breath finally released. His last transmission to the Vestige 7, sent as they broke orbit, was 11 seconds long. No words. Just breathing, steady, unafraid, entirely his own. And underneath it, very faint, a second voice, saying the exact same thing at the exact same time. Command flagged the coordinate as permanently forbidden 3 days later. Pharaoh made sure of it personally, using every favor she'd ever banked in 20 years of not asking for things. She still runs salvage. She still doesn't believe in fate, not really, not the version people mean when they use the word to make helplessness sound noble. But she keeps a photo of Tomas Reyes, 24 years old, grinning, 2 years out of flight school, still naive enough to think a derelict ship was an adventure, taped inside the Vestige 7's bridge, next to the console where his final transmission is still logged. She plays it sometimes. Not because she expects it to say something new. Because somewhere, in a fold of time that no longer needs anyone else to feed it, a version of him is still speaking. And she has decided that as long as someone is listening, that counts as him still being here. The stellar remnant near the old meridian coordinates has never been revisited. Official records list the zone as gravitationally unstable and not worth the insurance risk. But deep space listening posts occasionally still pick up a faint, looping signal from that dead zone, 11 seconds, no words, just breath and an echo of itself, repeating on an interval that doesn't quite match any known orbital pattern. Nobody's approved a mission to go check why. Some questions, it turns out, aren't safer answered than left alone. And some people, whatever the fold takes from them, choose to stay anyway, not because they have to. Because somebody has to hold the door.